Thank you. We'll be talking about mostly two of the plays from this anthology, which I should mention is, as you probably know, it's a collaboration of writers from the Jewish and Palestinian Diasporas, and it's the first ever anthology of its kind in any form of writing, not just playwriting, but any form of writing. And Stephen Orlov and Samah Sabawi will be signing copies at the back, and I would really recommend investing in this. It has 7 plays from lots of different genres and lots of different perspectives, and apart from being a real eye-opener, the plays are all terrifically entertaining, and I would love to see some of them staged, so hopefully this will generate enough interest to have some of these, or all of these plays staged, and maybe more of plays of this kind. So just to list the plays that are on here, we have Bitter Enders by Hannah Khalil. We have Facts by Arthur Milner, and I think Arthur Milner is in the room right now, yes, there at the back. We have The Peacemaker by Natasha Greenblatt. We have Sabra Falling by Ismail Khalidi. We have Sperm Count by Stephen Orlov. Tales of a City by the Sea by Samah Sabawi. And 21 Positions, a cartographic dream of the Middle East. And this one's by 3 writers. Excuse my pronunciation, Abdel Fattah Abu Sro, is that correct? Okay. Lisa Schlesinger and Naomi Wallace, and I really recommend buying this book, and if you can't buy it, I'm sure it'll be in library soon, but buy it if you can buy it. So we'll have readings from Stephen and Samah. I think Samah will begin, and you will set the scene for your play, I guess, put it into context. And this is Tales of a City by the Sea. Okay, so Samah is a Palestinian, Australian, Canadian playwright and poet. Her plays Cries from the Land and 3 Wishes had successful runs in Canada, and Tales of a City by the Sea, which you're about to hear from, enjoyed a sold-out world premiere at Melbourne's La Mama Theatre in Australia, and an Arabic premiere at the Al Ruad Cultural and Theatre Society in Palestine, which was on the West Bank, I believe. And you tried to get production in Gaza, but that didn't happen. Is that right?
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. Samah is also a poet. Her poets feature in anthologies including With Our Eyes Wide Open, Gaza on Silence, and I Remember My Name. And I Remember My Name has been awarded the Palestinian Book Award. And her play Tales from the City by the Sea has been awarded the Best Publication for VCE, which is the Victoria Certificate of Education, and also Best Performance for VCE. Stephen is an award-winning Boston-born Montreal dramatist whose social issue plays have been showcased in such theatre centres as Chicago and London. They include Isolated Incident with Rahul Varma, who is also in the room. Rahul runs Caesarea Dunya Theatre Company. Stephen also had a box office hit at Centaur Theatre with Freeze, an allegorical comedy set during our ice storm of the century, which you may remember. Bow Ties, a dramatic dialogue between words and music with acclaimed cellist Karen Kaderovec, is that correct? Who Stephen happens to be married to, who I believe is also in the room. Yes. And his trilogy of Jewish Palestinian diaspora plays, including his comedy drama Sperm Count, that appears in this anthology. Stephen has served as President of Playwrights Workshop Montreal, Vice President of Playwrights Union of Canada, Playwright in Residence of Centaur Theatre, and more recently, several terms on the executives of Playwrights Guild of Canada and Playwrights Canada Press. He is currently polishing Sperm Count sequel, Birthmark, a little bit about also,
which he has developed as a member of the inaugural playwrights unit of Infinite Theatre with the commissioning support of the Cole Foundation and Tisri Dunia Theatre. Stephen also teaches masterclasses and workshops on playwriting and adaptation for film, most recently for Playwrights Guild, the National Arts Festival of St. Lucia, and the Osher Institute at Dartmouth College. Okay, thank you. So
I'll start by setting the scene. The year is 2008, and the story starts in Gaza, on the Gaza beach in August. As the Free Gaza boats, the first to break the siege over Gaza, arrive. On these boats, there is a Palestinian-born, an American-born doctor. His name is Rami. And he arrives at Gaza to connect with his roots, but he's born and bred in the US. He falls in love with a woman from the Gaza Shati refugee camp. And he promises her that he will return and that they will get married and live happily ever after. Goes back to the US, and him and his mom are now returning to Gaza, but they can't get in because the border crossing is shut. They're stuck in Rafah, which is a very common Palestinian story. So they're stuck in Rafah, him and his mom, when the bombing campaign against Gaza of 2008 begins. Being a doctor, he can't just sit and watch, so he takes the underground tunnels and goes inside. Once he's inside, he spends a year in Gaza, and he's engaged with Jumana, his beloved. But after spending a year in Gaza, they're at a cross point where they have to make decisions about the rest of their lives, and this is the scene we're reading. Gaza Beach. Jumana and Rami enter, holding hands. Do you want us to read from the same one?
No, I'm going to read from here.
Okay. All right. So Gaza Beach, Jumana and Rami enter, holding hands. Here we are. We keep finding ourselves in the same place.
I can't believe a year has passed since we first met.
Don't tell me a year has passed. You can't measure our lives by a calendar. Time stands still here.
Frozen on the shores of this old battered city.
One calendar year can never contain our lives, our sorrows, desires.
Let us be lost in the absence of time. Let us linger in this moment forever.
He holds her and gently kisses her on the lips. She pulls away slowly. You are fully taking advantage of our engagement.
Not fully. Not yet.
He pulls her closer one more time. They have one long kiss. Jumana pushes him away slowly and looks around worried. You know we can get arrested for this.
Arrested for kissing? This place keeps growing on me every day.
What was that?
Well, I'm just so sick of this. The waiting. Remind me why we are not married yet?
Because you still need to go back to Texas and close your clinic and move your things.
No, I mean, why are we waiting? Let's just have the wedding, and then you can come with me to Texas. It's a great place. You would love it there. You know, kissing is actually celebrated, not criminalized in that part of the world.
Well then, let's go.
I am serious. I want us to get married now and leave, both of us, together.
Leave? We talked about this. You promised me we would stay here. You know I can't leave. If I leave, I may never see my family again.
Well, what about my family? My mother can't come here. What about her right to be with her grandchildren? What about my sisters, my friends, my practice? What about our future children? Don't they have the right to the best education, the best environment, and the best life?
What exactly is this about? You promised me we would stay here. I thought we had a plan.
Plans don't work in this environment of uncertainty.
I would have never allowed myself to get so close to you if I knew you planned to uproot me. You promised.
I did. But that was before I knew what it was like to live here. Now I know.
Now you know? They tried to warn me, but I didn't want to listen. My father told me your roots were not dug deep in this soil. I told him I had faith in you.
Stop, Jemima, stop. I need you to hear me. Jemima, you must hear me. You know, I would go to the moon for you. I love you. But you have to understand that we are talking about marriage and raising a family. Here, this complicates, it just complicates things. Since I've come here, I've treated hundreds of children with bullet wounds, shrapnel, white phosphorus burns, explosives, and I keep wondering, what if I have children here? What if one day my own child is brought to me on a stretcher? How do I protect my family here from this sky that rains death? What if the woman I love...
Don't what if? Robbie, my life is here. My family's here. I was raised here. This place is my home.
This place is a prison. You are trapped behind a big wall. Do you really want to condemn our children to this fate? I want a better life for us, for our children.
Yes. Yes, Rami, we're trapped behind a wall. But look around you. Open your eyes. See all the stories of how we survived, the trees we've replanted, the homes we've rebuilt. Inside these walls, Rami, old men still fiddle with their prayer beads. Mothers still bake mamoul on Eid. Families still gather under canopies with loaded bunches of grapes dangling above their heads. They nibble on watermelon seeds and drink maramiya tea. Women still perfect the art of matchmaking, and men still dream of freedom and democracy. Children climb on the sycamore trees, and lovers still woo in secrecy. And no matter how the conditions are adverse, Rami, over here we defy the universe every day. Behind these walls, Rami, we defy the universe.
I don't know how you do it. I'm not used to this. I don't know how.
I know it's not easy for you. You have a life out there that I can't even imagine. But my life is here, Rami. My life is here.
This has been a very difficult year.
I know. We've been through hell this year. I know that neither one of us is the same person we were that day on the beach a year ago when I begged you to stay. I'm not that same woman. I really do understand. So if you have doubts...
I don't doubt my love for you.
You're free to leave.
I can't live without you. I can't live without you.
So now what?
End of scene.
Now I'm going to have a scene from Stephen's play Sperm Count, and it's from Act 2, I believe, Act 2, Scene 1.
That's right. Sperm Count premiered in London shortly after 9/11 and a couple weeks after the war in Afghanistan began. It's a play that's set in Montreal. It uses male infertility as a multi-layered metaphor where gender and culture and generations all pinball off of each other. And as it relates to the Israeli-Palestinian, the Jewish-Palestinian conflict, a sperm character, an adolescent boy on a skateboard, emerges as the alter ego of the Jewish writer David. And so the sperm on a voyage for lineage is fitting allegory for nationhood and statehood. And the other two characters are Lena, the wife of David, who has to put her body on the line with in vitro hormone shots, trying to get pregnant, and David's estranged father. Jacob is a Holocaust survivor, and unlike David, the self-professed liberal, Jacob is extremely intolerant, particularly towards Arabs, and a Palestinian who is taking a scalpel to his family jewels. And lastly, of course, that the best infertility specialist in the city of Montreal that David approaches to help is Saeed Hamid, a Palestinian immigrant. And this is a comedy drama. So this scene, actually David and Jacob are interweaving, but I've cut him out. It interweaves with Lena and Saeed in his clinic. Lena has just experienced a couple of failures at standard in vitro, and Saeed is now explaining another option that another private clinic might be willing to do. And at the end, there's just a cutting between David and the sperm character. So, Act 2, Scene 1.
Subzonal drilling?
It is a new procedure. The sperm are injected directly into the wall of the egg. The initial results are encouraging for men with poor sperm motility, and so far it has only been done in England as a last resort.
But it is on your agenda.
With the right patient.
If I go ahead with this drilling procedure, what assurances can you give me?
Assurances?
It is a last resort. I need it to be right.
Well, I have never performed this procedure, and I am reluctant to start with a woman of your age.
With all due respect, doctor, I'm the one who's taking the risk, not you.
You are 39.
You're my doctor. You're not some car mechanic. You're my doctor. Just do it. It's going to work. Tell me you'll do it. Tell me it will be all right. Please.
Yes, I am your doctor. I'm not a prophet. Do not put me on any pedestal.
You won't do it.
Under the circumstances, I'm sorry.
Sorry? Why did you become a doctor?
I do not discuss my personal life with my patients.
Don't worry, your politics won't offend me.
Whether they are Jews, Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, or atheists, that is a matter of principle, not politics.
Yes, I know. I don't mean to pry into your private life. It's just that I need to trust someone.
Shouldn't that person be your husband?
My husband is not my doctor.
Then trust yourself, Miss Gone. Trust yourself.
Who do you serve? Dr. Hamid, your patients or yourself?
Lena turns to leave. Jabalia. Jabalia was a one-night stopover that lasted 17 years, a UN refugee camp just across the border.
You became a doctor to help your people in the camps?
No, to help them in our country. I have worked in the camps, but the answer is more complex. I was a few months old when my family fled our village. Life in Jabalia was hard enough that a young child grew old very fast. We lined up for food, for water. Our clothes never seemed to fit. Despite the poverty, we found our own playgrounds and we laughed like children everywhere. But we grew up with a hatred in our hearts. There was only one thing I hated more than Israelis.
It was in the middle of a war that Jews didn't...
Do you want me to debate your political opinions or answer your personal question? As a child, I listened to the stories of my elders. I chanted the slogans, I sang the songs, and I waited for something or someone to finally arrive and bring us home. But I had no idea who or what or when that would be. At times, that endless waiting to prevail provoked a sense of desperation. But too often, it felt passive, almost deadly. And by the time the relatives in Beirut got us out of Jabalia, I was determined never to wait for my death.
But why did you choose to become a doctor?
A poem and a friend. Well, he was more than a friend. We all called him Uncle Wahid. He had a smile as wide as the valley, and a donkey almost as stubborn as himself. One night, his donkey was spooked, and Uncle Wahid went chasing after it right out of the camp. We found him across the border, barely alive. The UN doctor was away working in another camp, and we could not save him. Your people stole our land and shot an old man chasing his donkey. Wahid was my friend. He hated no one, and no one hated him. All I wanted then was to kill a Jew, any Jew. At the funeral, my father handed me a poem. I walked to the coffin, looked at the angry crowd, and then I read it. A poem of revenge.
A hate poem inspired you to become a doctor.
When I turned to place the poem on Wahid's heart, finally, I could see his face. I just stood there, looking at his face. I wanted him to smile again, but his eyes remained shut, and at that moment, rage flooded my veins, and all I wanted was a rifle. As the years passed by, I asked myself many times, what would Uncle Wahid want me to do? I could not see him holding a gun, and all I could do was pick up a stone. When it came time to choose my courses at university in Beirut, I already know. I chose a scalpel, not a sword. And I still see Uncle Wahid's face in my dreams.
One last question.
Crossfade to David and Sperm in the study. What do you got against me anyway? I mean, what have I ever done to you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Well, that'll change. You'll see. Oh, yeah? All of a sudden, we're going to have a lovey-dovey relationship just because you and Gramps finally experienced this one moment of umbilical bonding? Well, there's more to it than that. Besides, he still won't listen to me. He's in there packing his bags. Crossfade back to the clinic.
If that's what you are doing in Kuwait, why won't you try this drilling procedure on me?
Well, I already told you.
Your Uncle Wahid. What would he say to me now? No, you're too old? Sorry, no child for you? Would he say that to me? Look, the results are impressive. You said that yourself. And you're ready to try it. Dr. Hamid, how long must I wait for my husband's child? The rest of my life? Just one try. That is all I'm asking.
End of scene.
So just to begin with, Samah, about your play, one of the main themes of it is this idea that we often, Gaza is often described as being the biggest open prison in the world, but your character, she doesn't want to escape from this prison, and the other, the guy she's in love with wants to bring her out of that prison. Could you just tell me something about that way, those different ways of seeing the world as far as Gaza is concerned in the play?
After the 2009 bombings, 2008-2009 3-week bombardment of Gaza, a lot of the sentiment that was coming out of the young people at the time was this willingness to stay steadfast, rebuild. There was so much effort put into cleaning up the camps, replanting trees. My family, my husband's family, who have land, and they lost a lot of their trees. They were replanting, and so there was this renewal to life. There was a lot of hope during that time, and so I captured that, I guess, with the Jumana character. But I've been asked that if I were to write the same play now, after the 2014 bombardment, so there's been 3 wars on Gaza in the last 6 or 7 years, but the last one lasted for 51 days, and the sentiment has changed amongst the young people. And so if I were to write a sequel to this, not that I would want to, but if I were to do it, it would be about people trying to escape and washing ashore in Europe's on Europe's beaches, because that's exactly what happened after the bombardment of Gaza. So it is a picture of life as it was that particular time, but life changes, and it breaks my heart to say it, for Gaza to the worse, continuously.
You say that you don't want to write a sequel on it, but are you dealing with what you've just spoken about in plays that you're writing now, or in poetry?
Yes, I'm writing the current play that I'm developing. It's called Them, so it's about those who we have othered, and it tries to give life and voice to the people we call asylum seekers and refugees, but this is before they become asylum seekers and refugees. So I go into the last 5 days in the life of a group of friends and a couple and their friends, and what forces them to make these decisions, what kind of life they have, and what kind of impossible choices they're always presented with, where it's doomed if you do and doomed if you don't. So that's the subject of my current play, and it doesn't take place in Palestine. It's focused more on what's going on in Syria.
Right. The story of actually putting the play on, you tried to put it on in 3 separate locations at the same time, but it just went on in 2 locations. That's an incredible story in itself. Could you just tell us something about that? And you were telling me before that you also had some news that came through yesterday that you were interested in writing an article about, but you will hear now, so you can tell us that now.
When I wrote this play, it was born out of the poetry, and that's why the play is a little bit lyrical. So the poems came before the play was written, and as I was writing the play, my husband was spending he spent around 6 months in Gaza when I wrote that first draft, and so we were communicating via Skype, and I guess present on my mind was the distance and how we Palestinians on the outside are constantly trying to communicate with those on the inside. And so the play tackles this relationship. And you've heard that in the scene we've read between Rami and Jumana. And so when it was time to produce it, I thought, wouldn't it be a great idea if it was produced in Gaza, the West Bank, and in Melbourne at the same time, which connects the Palestinians in the diaspora to the Palestinians in Gaza, and connects Gaza to the West Bank. Ashtar Theatre thought it was a great idea. Al-Rawat Theatre in the West Bank thought it was a great idea, and my theatre, La Mama, jumped on the idea as well. So we started working towards the production. And what happened is, when we got as far as, we've got a lot of stuff now figured out, and we were ready to start casting. We're months before putting the play on stage. The war on Gaza broke out in 2014. And members of my production crew in Gaza, the director lost 11 members of his family. My project manager, who was so excited about being involved in this international collaboration, she lost, she had her office in a tower called the Pasha Tower. The Pasha Tower was known for having all these offices for producers, musicians, young people who want to do stuff, rap artists, and she had her office there and had all her reels and films, and she was designing posters and stuff for the play. That went under an F-16 bomb. The entire tower just collapsed to nothing. So when the bombing stopped, they told me that at first, they would still produce the play and stage it on the rubble. But of course, you can't imagine the trauma that people go through over there. And I just simply said, we can't do it. And they said, thank you. It's just not the right time for us to continue. So Gaza was out of the picture. The West Bank and Melbourne production teams were like, now we need to put on this play more than ever, let's do it. So a week before opening night, we hear from our production team in the West Bank and Aida refugee camp that the camp's fallen under heavy curfews and incursions, and that they're behind schedule in trying to rehearse because they can't get to the theater. And this went on and on and on. We opened alone in Melbourne. The West Bank, they were able to open 2 weeks after we did because of the situation that they're living through, and Gaza still till this day has not had its production. So to me, this was life telling us what privilege we have outside, for me in Australia, and how, when you compare to what people have to go through, artists, theater makers in other places. Yeah.
Could you tell me something as well about there was what happened recently with the Victorian education, Victoria education curriculum?
Yeah, so the play was listed as recommended reading on the VCE playlist, the Victorian Curriculum of Education playlist for students in year 11 and 12. The Vinay Breath ADL were very upset when this news broke out, and they tried to have the book removed from the playlist. In doing so, they were able to they created such a fuss that the state government interrupted its budget hearings to discuss this independent theater play about Gaza, because God forbid that a Palestinian story should be told to VCE students in Victoria. They weren't able to remove the book. There was a lot of support for the work from members of the Jewish community as well as the wider community. And the book remained, and we had a stellar season, not one complaint till this day. But what happened in the aftermath of all of that is that the Minister of Education in Victoria, as a result of this fake controversy, promised that he would reassess the process by which books are chosen for VCE. The new guidelines came out today, and basically Shakespeare doesn't have a chance in having his work read in Victorian schools in Australia, because the regulations became so tight around what it is that we can or cannot teach children in schools. They've just gone way overboard. So this is a little bit of a controversy brewing now. Thank you.
So Stephen, your play, Sperm Count, as you described, is a dramatic comedy. But as you heard from the scene just there, the Palestinian doctor tells his story, and there's a scene that you cut out from that where the old Jewish character tells his story. So underneath this comedy, there's this real kind of desperate tragedy going underneath it. And I guess one of the themes of the play, and maybe the whole anthology, is this idea of people just telling each other their story, that maybe the other people aren't used to hearing those stories, and maybe makes those characters more human. Was that a kind of deliberate strategy of that play?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think you can separate, I won't say tragedy, but drama and comedy from our life. That's humanity. That's what we experience. And as dramatists, above all else, we have to portray on stage human beings. And whether they're Jewish or Palestinian, no matter what side they're on, the characters I create have to express the full range of strength and frailty along the moral compass. And so in the case of Sperm Count, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the most inflammatory ongoing regional conflict of the past 70 years. But if we can't deliver that with the breadth of human experience and storytelling, of comedy and drama, then I think we fail in reaching our audience. So I have tried to create those kind of characters and those kind of stories which give expression to characters on both sides. And I think in our anthology we don't hide any of our characters hide the conflict. I mean, there are characters who are screaming at the enemy. But at the same time, the plays we chose, as in terms of the collective of the anthology, is really trying to bridge the cultural divide that has separated us. So on stage, as dramatists, we have a responsibility to turn the political into the personal. And to put aside the maps and the statistics and the scales that are defined by numbers, and deliver true stories, authentic stories. And so I'll leave it at that.
I think yours, am I right in saying that yours is the only play that takes place not in Israel or in the occupied territory?
Well, one of our other plays, Ismail Khalidi, a very fine playwright, grew up in New York, but he's in Chile now. And I just might mention that the plays in our anthology, they deal with either the Israeli-Palestinian conflict directly or Jewish-Palestinian relations in the diaspora. And Ismail's play is set in Beirut in 82-83 during the horrendous civil war and bombing there. Palestinian and Israeli characters, but set in Beirut. My play is the only one in the anthology that is set in North America, here in Montreal. And so there has been some questions that have been posed to me in the past of why is this not much more violent a play? And it ignores the fact that this is a diaspora story. And as much as I'm drawn to the issue as a Jew of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the world that I know is here. And I've set the story in Montreal. And so I try to give expression to what is going over there through a very distinct diaspora perspective.
Right. Just to talk about the character of the sperm cell. I mean, it's a great comic device, but it's also a serious device to talk about lineage and identity. So could you just tell us something about where the idea came from and what your aim is?
Do you really want me to reveal that in
I'm
public?
not sure. But we're all adults, you can tell us.
All right, I will be totally transparent here. I myself experienced infertility problems, and I did have an Egyptian specialist. So I do have to credit a couple of the funny lines that Saeed delivers the first time he meets David. When David asks, "How long are you going to stick that inside me?" He says, "Just a few miles." I mean, these are a few lines that were told to me. Now, fortunately, I didn't have to experience what David and Lena went through in sperm count, but my oldest childhood buddy did. Yeah, and they conceived through fertility, you know. So I've dealt with that issue, and of course, growing up as a Jew, it's the birthmark of the tribe. You know, our relationship with Israel. So this was an unavoidable relationship, and so you put these two things together, and up comes sperm count. And this sperm character is a total figment of my imagination, so why not have him be a figment of David's imagination in the story? And David, he's the only one who has a running dialogue with the sperm character, who fuels his fears of fatherhood and the pain he experienced growing up with an intolerant father.
Okay. I wasn't necessarily asking you to be so honest about your past, but thank you for sharing.
I thought I picked up the subtext, you know.
I think you imagined that subject. As a playwright, you probably often do that. Could you just tell me something about your experience of putting this play on as well? Again, that's an interesting story, and maybe segue from that into saying something about the sequel, Birthmark.
Well, Brian Wasserman, who we miss very much at the Seagull, asked me to read a scene from Sperm Count at a North American Jewish theater conference that at that time the Sadie was hosting. And so I read it with a few actors, Ellen David and David Francis. And Julia Pascal, the first woman to direct at the National Theatre in England, was in the audience. She asked to read the play. She read it that night and came up to me and said she wanted to direct and produce it in London. So it had its world premiere in London, and before that production, of course, 9/11 occurred in September 2011. A couple months later, I went over to London to polish and work with the cast. And London was ablaze, and political turmoil, and so the play was provocative because of its timing after 9/11. To put a Palestinian character on stage was inflammatory to a lot of people. And the theater that premiered it received 2 bomb threats before opening night. And they were anonymous. So I don't know if it came from where it came from. I'll just leave it at that. But the cast and crew met with Julia and the theater company, and they bravely defied the threat. And unfortunately, it premiered without incident. And so it went on, and in the midst of that, I was asked to participate in this international theater conference in Tel Aviv during the Second Intifada. And so when I was there, I arrived at a site where there had been a suicide bombing 2 hours before in Haifa. And that night, Ariel Sharon responded by bombing Arafat's compound in Ramallah. And so those 2 events stayed with me, and that is the conception of my sequel, which is called Birthmark. So I'll just take a minute, as you asked about the play. It's the sequel to Sperm Count. The political climate in the theater community throughout North America after 9/11 was so toxic that, after spending a year approaching theaters after this successful run in London, and absolutely no takes, I shelved the play and I moved on to other projects. But it still stayed with me, those experiences. And what was going on leading up eventually to the bombardment of Gaza in 2014, I pulled the script out, and the conception of this anthology emerged, and I began writing the sequel, Birthmark. And Birthmark, this sperm character, is now 20 years old. He's been drawn to ultra-Orthodoxy, and David, his wife, died shortly after giving childbirth, and on Nelson's birthday, his son, this sperm character, now 19 years old, announces he's going to quit McGill and go off and join one of the most remote settlements in the West Bank, an ultra-Orthodox settlement, which was actually an outpost. So this is David's greatest fear. He plays his last trump card saying, you can't go, you're not even a Jew. And then it's revealed what happened in Sperm Count, that there was a mix-up at the fertility clinic, and there was a 20% chance that the embryo that gave birth to Nelson was from a Palestinian immigrant. So that takes off, and I'll just end very quickly by saying Nelson now has to seek out Jamilia Hassan, the woman whose egg was found in his mother's mix-up, and ask her, plead with her to have a DNA test to prove that he's a Jew. And she says, a Jew or a Palestinian? And she had adopted, because she had failed to conceive, she adopted a Palestinian immigrant, a young girl who's now 20 years old at UQAM. And so the dynamics of this take off. So this is what keeps me up at night.
I think you've piqued everybody's interest, and I think there's a possibility of seeing this play in 2018. Is that
well,
correct?
Certainly hope so.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's talk about the anthology itself. I suppose the most obvious question to begin with is, how did you two get together to? Where did the idea come from, and maybe something about? We'll maybe get on to your decisions about which plays went into this book later, but just the origins of the concept. Could you just tell us something about that, maybe?
Yeah, I think probably Stephen should start because the idea started with him, and then I'll just continue.
Well, I had been on the board of the Playwrights Guild and Playwrights Canada Press, and so I approached Annie Gibson, the publisher of Playwrights Canada Press, the major publisher of Canadian drama, about this idea of having a diaspora story, plays about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from the diaspora perspective. Now, at that time, and she thought it was a great idea, totally unique. She gave me the green light. At that time, I thought it was just the first drama anthology by diaspora writers, and within a very short time, I realized that it's the first English language anthology worldwide in any genre of drama, prose, or poetry by Jewish and Palestinian writers. It's just never been done before. So it took me about maybe an hour after she gave me the green light to realize that I couldn't do this without a Palestinian co-editor, and preferably a woman. And so I went on a Google search. And I read about Samah's first play, 3 Wishes, a wonderful adaptation she made of a book giving expression to Israeli and Palestinian children about the conflict. And so I wrote to her, I introduced myself, I asked if I could read the play, and fortunately I was wise enough to attach sperm count to it, and I'll let her continue.
So I get this email from this guy, and he wants me to co-edit. Well, he hasn't asked for co-editing at that point, but after he read the play Tales of a City by the Sea, that's when he asked me to co-edit. So now I'm really suspicious. So I'm Googling him, I'm looking him up, and he seems really well established, and and I'm thinking, it has to be Mossad. What do I do with this? And then I thought, nah, maybe he's not a Mossad agent, but this is about co-opting me into a web of, So anyways, I read his play, and I took a leap of faith. I had a conversation with him, and I explained to him that I reject all kinds of projects that aim at just normalizing the occupation and normalizing what's going on with the Palestinians, and just bringing Palestinians and Israelis together, or Jewish people and Palestinian people together, and then everybody goes home and nothing happens, and that I myself would never cross the civil society, Palestinian civil society's calls for boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, and like all these other things that I believed in very strongly. And I said, but I believe there is always room for projects like this as long as they adhere to certain guidelines, and we need them, and we need to have this space. And then we just took it from there, and I'm so glad that I took this journey, and I'm absolutely honored to have worked with Stephen Orlov on this, and I'm so thankful and grateful that he sent me that email.
Stephen, are you Mossad? Oh no, that wasn't the question. The question was, could you just tell me something about the choice of plays, about, were you spoiled for choice, or was it difficult actually finding plays for the anthology, and maybe something about which plays almost made it? You don't have to name names, but what kind of criteria made you reject some plays and accept other plays?
Well, I'll start, and then Samah can offer her perspective. I think the starting point for us in terms of establishing trust rather than principle was reading our plays. Mm-hmm. That both the plays were attempts to give expression to the real experience of human beings, and that we sensed early on from our discussions that we wanted an anthology that was not going to simply look over ghetto walls, but it was going to bridge the cultural divide. So I think that was the overriding principle that we embraced in soliciting plays and choosing plays. We wanted plays that would comprise this anthology in a way that the collection would offer hope with realistic conflict, but at the same time would offer a sense of peace and social justice. So that, and it's not like Samah and I said, okay, principle number one, is this. It's something that that we sensed, and it evolved, and as we looked at plays, it became clearer and clearer. Now, having said that, there's a whole range of dramaturgical issues that we had to deal with. I mean, the biggest problem we faced in the plays we solicited that we did not include, even on our short list, was the characterization of the other. And we saw this in Jewish plays that we read and Palestinian plays, that the other character, the main characters, were too stereotypical. And in our anthology, the plays do have secondary characters that deliver unidimensional roles, as we must as dramatists. But the main characters we try to really flesh out as real human beings with a range of the good and bad, which is human. So I think that this was the sense that we had of the kind of plays. We wanted to also have a variance between comedy and drama, between realism and the surreal, between plays set directly in the homeland and those in the diaspora, and characters that gave expression to a range of opinions on both sides.
Yeah, and I think some plays written by Jewish playwrights and some by Palestinian playwrights that we came across, they were very preachy when it came to trying to make a point about the conflict, that the story itself gets drowned in the background. They were very hardcore, with they were written like a manifesto and then turned into play. So we've come across some of those as well. But I think the ones that we ended up with are all an absolute pleasure to read. And people are complex creatures, and you cannot box them. And I think this is what we did very well with this anthology. Is we've offered this range of personalities and voices and genres that we hope that you will enjoy reading each one of them.
Okay, I think we'll open it up to the audience soon. I think we have half an hour left. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Just one question, which partly comes from the experience you both had of putting these plays on, but the idea that the very idea of creating an anthology like this is, from some quarters, it's a taboo. And do you see that partly with that more of this kind of thing, maybe that taboo will be broken, or do you see the positions hardening, and do you see there is less chance maybe, or more chance of getting plays like this on the stage these days? I know it's a huge general question, but if you have any thoughts about that.
Are we talking about the plays or the anthology?
I guess both, but do you see the situation? I mean, I'll stick with theatre for now because we're talking about plays, but do you see the situation for theatre becoming more difficult for plays like this, or do you see because everybody is talking about this situation, is it more of a hunger for seeing this kind of play on the stage?
What we've experienced, and I can only talk from personal experience, with my play Tales of a City by the Sea in Melbourne, is that no mainstream theatre wanted to produce it or take a chance on it, or offer it venue and all of that. But we have La Mama. La Mama is an incredible theatre that really gives platform to all the new writers and new voices. And so we went with the La Mama Theatre, and they co-produced the show. And we did sell out all our seasons, and so it was a great success. And what I got from that was that there is a hunger for this. And we got really amazing reviews, we got fantastic awards and so on. But if I were to take the script now, and I was told by some people in some of the bigger theaters that this is just not going to be a commercial success, so we can't put it on because it won't sell tickets. So when I went back after our 60th performance, which is incredible for independent theater, and I spoke to that same guy, he basically said, no, we still can't put on your play. Like, it doesn't matter how successful it's, the subject matter itself would not be appealing to a wider audience. So I don't know what this wider audience looks like, but they're somewhere out there, and they're not interested in anything that is not very mainstream and, I'd hate to say it, but very white if you go to these theaters. you barely see color on stage and you barely see color in the audience. It's unfortunate. So that's as far as theater. But I think as far as people wanting these, they're very hungry for this kind of theater.
I would say that, yes, I think there are two parts to your question. One is about the taboo and the other is about the anthology, our times changing. And there's absolutely no question in my mind that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is still one of the last remaining thematic taboos for most Western theaters, major Western theaters, from North America to Europe to Oceania. Major theaters will not produce, commission, or solicit plays in the conflict. And there are many different reasons for this, but it's not a conspiracy. It's been fueled by decades of prejudice, ignorance, and timidity. And part of the timidity is not that audiences won't come. It's that the donors will stop giving money. And there are numerous examples of these occurring. I mean, Samah gave one example, another in our play, 21 Positions. You know, Naomi Wallace, one of the two American playwrights whose works have been commissioned by Comédie Française, the French National Theatre, the other one being Tennessee Williams. So she's commissioned to write 21 Positions. She writes it with Lisa Schlesinger, Abdel Fattah al-Thar, and the Guthrie Theatre, major American theatre, who had commissioned it, said, no, we won't put it on for thematic reasons, not artistic reasons. Thematic reasons is political censorship. And there are so many other examples. Canadian Stage had announced several years ago its new season was going to include My Name is Rachel Corrie. They announced it in public, and then all of a sudden, within weeks, they pulled it after announcing it part of their next season and saying, well, the AD said, I went to New York, I saw the play, it was flat, the audience didn't react, and of course, the main atrium of the theater has a plaque on it by the main Jewish donor of Canadian Stage, who vehemently opposed it. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions why he didn't include it. Tony Kushner, the most acclaimed American playwright of his generation, was awarded an honorary degree by City University in New York, and anti-Palestinian pro-Israeli zealots, one of whom was on the board, lobbied, calling him a self-hating Jew because of his opposition to the occupation and the bombardment of Gaza. The Board of Trustees rescinded giving him an honorary degree until the public outcry was so strong that they rescinded the rescinding, gave him the award, and he graciously accepted it. Ari Roth, who built up Theater J, the finest American Jewish theater in Washington, D.C., was fired because he had the audacity to produce plays that had critical comments about the occupation written by Israeli playwrights. He was the executive director and the artistic director for 20 years, built this theater up, fired. He rebounded in his former Mosaic Theater in Washington, D.C. So, you know, these are examples of the kind of de facto boycott that has occurred. And then there's the censorship campaigns that Samah has talked about. So this is what we still have to confront. However, times are changing. And this anthology is a reflection of those changing times, because there is a thirst of the public to go to plays and watch drama that gives expression to hope for the future.
But I'm always mindful that it's not just about the occupation. There are Palestinians who are denied the right to return in the millions, who are stuck in refugee camps, and there are Palestinians who are citizens of the State of Israel who are second-class citizens. Look, I'll start by saying there is always hope, because life without hope is life not worth living. So as a Palestinian, I wake up every morning and I find hope. So we can't give up. Where is this conflict going? Right now, we're in very, very dark times. We have the rise of the right worldwide, and we have a Netanyahu government that has been on speed in its expansion and in its theft of Palestinian land and resources. Gaza is going from bad to worse. The Palestinian Authority continues to be very corrupt and very out of touch with the Palestinian people. Palestinians on the ground are facing multi-layers of oppression, be it by the Bantustan governments that they have, or by the occupying forces that oversees everything. My only hope in changing things right now lies with my support for Palestinian civil society's call for boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, until the day comes when we Palestinians and Jews in the land of Israel-Palestine can coexist in peace as equals. I think the way forward from here is going to be a long way. It's going to be a lot of hard work, hopefully less heartache than what we've experienced so far, but probably not. But if I can raise my children and my grandchildren and our future generations to the idea that we are no better than our neighbors who are Jewish, and our Jewish neighbors are no better than us, and we can live as equals, I think I've done something right. That's where I stand.
I'll just add my own take to your question. I think there are dark clouds overhead, particularly with the election of Donald Trump. And in Israel today, the Netanyahu government is the most right-wing government in the history of Israel. I mean, two recent laws that were just passed, the regulation law, which legalizes, this gives law, it was passed by the Knesset, it legalizes the state to expropriate land owned by Palestinians. They would be given a 20-year use rental for 20 years, or they could swap land for who knows where. But that this is mandatory. So imagine that occurring here in Côte Saint-Luc or anywhere in the plateau, a government to just deciding we can expropriate your land, not for a highway, but for settlement. So that law is just passed, and there are many Israelis who are opposed to that. So this is the kind of dark clouds. And yet there is sun shining, trying to break through that. And I would just offer this as a historical perspective. They said the same thing about South Africa. They said the same thing about Northern Ireland. And yet change has come. Sometimes the pace of history it is at the rate of a snail. But when things develop and concentration occurs, the pace of history can change very, very quickly. So we shouldn't lose hope that there is a brighter future ahead.
You were in Australian, Palestinian, Australian.
I lived in Ottawa for, I came with my husband here. I was Australian first. So we immigrated to Australia when I was a very little girl. And then when I got married, I came with my husband to Ottawa. He had a work permit with a computer engineering company. I was very proud of my Australian citizenship at the time, because it was the first citizenship we got. We were refugees until that point, and I felt it offered a lot of hope and possibilities, endless possibilities for us. We could travel, we could do a lot of stuff now that we became citizens. So for sentimental purposes, I didn't want to become a Canadian citizen for a very long time. And then the war on Iraq happened, and Christian did not sign up, and Australia went to war. And so I very proudly went and I applied for my Canadian citizenship, and that's how I became Canadian as well.
I sent Chrétien a Valentine's Day card. So the question is about the role. I think our job as dramatists is, you know, as we write in our anthology, is to shed light on really the what really blinds us with fear. And as dramatists, we have I think a responsibility as progressive dramatists to pen plays that expose the dark shadows of the past and the firestorms of our present in order to help change society one play at a time and play a role, however modestly, in contributing to a more peaceful and just world for our children and our grandchildren. But I'll just add one point, and that is, last Monday was Holocaust Remembrance Day, and Jews the world over shouted to the heavens that never again, as we must every year. But far too often, Israeli propaganda has used the Holocaust as a fear-mongering tool to rationalize its brutal occupation of Palestine. And so for Jews, yes, we must always remember, but when it comes to that occupation of Palestine, Jews have to also shout, "Not by us." And diaspora Jews have to shout, "Never in our name."
Samah, we're going to end with a poem from Samah. So I will just finish by saying that this book is available, and Samah and Stephen will be signing it. And in addition to the plays, there are lots of really interesting essays, and it's really worth investing in this book, I have to say. So thank you very much.
Let's just add before. Is this just before Samah reads this amazing? It's going to blow you away. No, I'm sorry. I have
no pressure.
But I just want to say that for those of you who don't have much experience in reading plays, for many lovers of literature, reading drama is a page turner because characters in conflict, scene by scene, from beginning to end. So, Samah.
So this poem is from the anthology I Remember My Name. The book is available also in the back. It's called The Liberation Anthem. And I wrote it after having an exhausting conversation with a woman who, she's an Australian Jewish woman who kept telling me that she was very afraid of the idea of Palestinian nationhood and Palestinian statehood. And so this was my response to her. It's called The Liberation Anthem. It's dedicated to the Israelis who fear our freedom. Don't be afraid. We will liberate you too. This is my rendition of an anthem to be sung. That day you and I will stand side by side, shoulder to shoulder, watching a new dawn wipe away decades of hate and savagery. The moment that I rise from the ashes of your oppression, I promise you I will not rise alone. You too will rise with me. You will be liberated from your tyranny, and my freedom will bring you salvation. This is my rendition of an anthem to be sung. I will craft new words of expression outside of this suffocating language that has occupied me. Your words are like your walls. They encroach on my humanity. I am more than demography. I'm not your terrorist, not your Islamist, not your fundamentalist, extremist, radical. I am more than letters, adjectives, and syllables, so I will construct my own language and will defeat your words of power with the power of my words. This is my rendition of an anthem to be sung.
I don't want to obliterate or humiliate you. I refuse to hate you, don't care to demonize or proselytize or theorize your intentions. Every breath you draw reminds me you are human. The sound of your beating heart is rhythm familiar to my ears. You and I are no different. We are made of blood and tears. This is my rendition of an anthem to be sung. I will rise and soar above your matrix of control, and with the power of my words, your walls will fall. And that concrete that once segregated us, we could use it to rebuild homes. The bulldozers and the tanks will dissolve into the earth. The sap will run in the olive trees. The gates will open wide for the refugees. We will be free. We will be free. And I will be your equal. And only then you will be mine. My other self, my fellow human being. Thank you.